I was working in the ER one night when this huge dude, maybe 300 to 350 pounds, came in from a car accident with the paramedics giving him CPR. We quickly decided that he would have to go to the OR as he eventually flatlined. I was new and my knowledge was pretty limited at the time, but I knew they were going to have to massage the guy's heart. I was pretty relieved since we had all been taking turns pumping this big man's blood for him. Shortly after he left, I was talking to some of the medics and doctors, and they said that it would be a great experience for me to watch the procedure in the OR. So, I scrubbed up really quick and went in to watch in the back. When I got to the OR, they were just about to start cutting the guy open. I watched in excitement as they began cutting through everything. Then suddenly, everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Blood started bursting out of this guy like a pot boiling over. There was more blood than I had ever seen, and hopefully will ever see again. I don't remember anyone saying, "Oh my God," but I remember everyone getting really quiet. The operating team stepped back as the blood flowed out of him onto the table and then falling on the floor. The pool of blood crept across the floor until it got a couple of feet away from me. Most of the operating team was standing in a lake of blood by the time it stopped. The surgeon said that it looked like at least 3 liters of blood. It was like something out of a horror scene, and I think I was in shock because I felt so weird and out of place afterward. Later on, I found out that upon a closer inspection of the x-rays, the poor man's sternum had given way. The going theories were either that his sternum had broken when his chest hit the steering wheel during his accident, or from the CPR performed by the paramedics. People don't realize how dangerous CPR can be. The bone had splintered and punctured into his major blood vessels, so we had just been pumping blood into his pericardium. That's what exploded when the OR team cut him open. There was little we could do to save this man's life. After that episode, the sight of blood never bothered me anymore.
I was in charge of the ICU unit the other day, and we had a pretty messy situation. We had a patient who had some big abdominal trauma. He had gone to the OR, and he was too sick for us to be able to close his abdomen, so we left it open. We had a sheet of plastic protecting his intestines, and we placed a vacuumed sponge dressing on top of it, called a wound vac. The patient's nurse called me into the room to look at the abdomen because she thought she saw pieces of the bowel seeping out of the bag and getting sucked into the wound vac. I agreed and thought the bowel looked pretty dusky as well, so we called the doctor to come and look at it. He advised that we take the wound vac off, tuck the bowel back into the bag it had escaped from, and put a new wound vac on. It all just sounded like it was going to be a disaster, but whatever. So we took off the wound vac. We could see that the patient's bowels had become very swollen from the fluids, trauma, etc. Just as we were lifting it, the unexpected happened. The patient's bowels all slipped out. The bag had dislodged significantly. When we tried tucking the bowels in one side, they would spill out the other. The guy was in his bed just disemboweling, and we simply could not get everything back in. Luckily, the anesthesia we had given the patient kept him very nicely sedated. But it was messy. We really had to step back and say, well, shoot, how do we get this guy's guts back inside of him? We ended up having to call in 6 other people to help tuck things back in. We finally got him back to the OR for them to get everything back into its proper place.
74-year-old Dirk Schroeder went into a hospital in Germany to undergo surgery to treat his prostate cancer, which is surprising because we assumed that all buildings in Germany were terrifying old castles made of chocolate. Everything seemed to go well at first, but for the next several months, Schroeder's pain level gradually intensified to an excruciating degree, which is the opposite of what was supposed to happen. Then one of his nurses noticed a pad of gauze beginning to ooze its way out of one of his surgery wounds, so Schroeder was sent back to the Bavarian Medical Palace, where it was soon discovered that his doctors had left no less than 16 different items in his body, as if they had confused his vivisected torso for the floor of a taxicab. The treasure trove of medical waste left inside Schroeder's body for no conceivable reason included an entire roll of bandages, a compress, several more gauze pads, a fucking needle, and part of a surgical mask, because why the hell not? Evidently, the doctors expected Schroeder to die right then and there, and were doing their best to turn his body into a time capsule. It took 2 additional surgeries to remove all the bullshit they had dropped inside the elderly man's body, putting a whole lot of totally unnecessary strain on a man in his 70s dying of prostate cancer. However, without a doubt, the most beautiful detail of this story is the fact that the negligent surgeons refused to apologize or even acknowledge that they had done anything wrong. They went so far as to suggest that the items probably got inside his torso after the surgery, although they knew better than to try to concoct a specific scenario in which more than a dozen items directly related to surgery could have osmosed their way through his skin. Schroeder sadly succumbed to cancer a few years later, but his family is currently suing the hospital that turned him into a medical waste piñata for $127,000, roughly $8,000 per item that the doctors left inside Schroeder's body and later claimed he crammed in there himself.
"35-year-old Vishal Thakkar from Tulsa, Oklahoma, had just gone through a divorce and was ready to head back into the dating scene without the burden of his slightly misaligned nostrils weighing him down, because as we all know, the very apex of physical beauty is judged by the symmetry of a person's booger caves. So Thakkar contacted Dr. Angelo Cuzzolina, one of the highest-rated plastic surgeons in the country and the president of the American Board of Plastic Surgery, to perform the fairly simple procedure of resculpting his nose holes. However, what should have been a quick outpatient surgery became over 20 separate procedures that gradually turned Thakkar into Gary Oldman from Hannibal, because Cuzzolina apparently misheard Thakkar's request for a new nose as an impassioned plea to save money on Halloween costumes for the rest of his life. Ironically, Thakkar was originally pleased with the results of the surgery, but began to have trouble breathing and had to return for some adjustments. The problems kept compounding, requiring Thakkar to come back for more and more surgeries, until the nose allegedly became so badly infected that Cuzzolina just chopped the whole thing right off his goddamned face. The cobbled-together understudy for Thakkar's nose includes pieces of cartilage from his ear and his freaking rib cage, along with metal implants and gusts of mad scientist laughter. Thakkar specifically requested that his ear not be harvested for parts, gravely mistaking Cuzzolina for a person with an overabundance of shits to give. Thakkar is now left with a single giant nostril hiding beneath a lump of bulbous flesh vaguely resembling rest-home nudity. Thakkar has to keep the hole propped open with a plastic straw in order to breathe, or else his nose will collapse in on itself like a coal mine tragedy and suffocate him. Frankly, we're amazed the doctor didn't just scotch tape some Play-Doh to the front of Thakkar's head and call it a day. And yes, he's suing the doctor.
21-year-old Christopher Crist stopped by Amazing Family Dental in Indianapolis to have 3 problem teeth removed, rightfully expecting to be dazzled by amazing dentistry and sent on his merry way. The extraction proceeded normally at first, with Crist receiving a generous dose of numbing agents before the partial deboning of his mouth began. However, once the requested 3 teeth had been removed, the dentist decided to just go ahead and yank the remaining 25 from Crist's head, because Amazing Family Dental is apparently run by Oren Scrivello from Little Shop of Horrors. Crist, who incidentally is autistic, was sent staggering back to his family with fewer teeth than a jack-o'-lantern, completely unable to explain what had happened. He insists that he repeated explicit instructions to remove only the 3 specified teeth several times. But by the time the great molar harvest fell into full swing, he was too groggy from the Novocaine to do anything about it. The local news generously referred to the incident as a communications mix-up, but one would assume that such a staggeringly life-altering measure as ripping all of the teeth from your goddamned head would require at least 1 or 2 carefully informed signatures and not simply be the dentist's default setting. Crist and his family are preparing to file a complaint with the state, which we can only assume will lead to a substantial lawsuit, because there is no logical reason for a medical professional to extract all your food grinders without a seriously compelling and thoroughly documented reason. The dentist being some kind of goblin trying to make a necklace or a set of keys for a tiny piano doesn't count.